Stuffers value peace and exploders value honesty. I see that so much in our marriage. My husband values peace and I value honesty. And neither of those things are bad, but they are at conflict with each other when I am trying to be vulnerable and honest and just say whatever I want to say and whatever I think and feel. And he's trying to keep the peace. So he's not saying whatever he thinks or feels because he doesn't want to hurt my feelings. So there needs to be this middle ground where I'm not exploding and he's not stuffing. Welcome to Book Therapy. I'm your host, Kim Patton. There's no way to count how many books are floating around in this world. Some are decent, some are truly terrible, and some are great. Today we're going to take a deep dive into one great book. Together we will discover gems of truth and encouragement to help you face your current season of life. I'm ready, you're ready, let's get this party started. Hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Book Therapy. I have another book for you coming up next, but first I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying the show, I so appreciate having you in my life. It has been a blessing just to share books with you over the years, and we are approaching the end of season 2 and the beginning of season 3 this summer. So thank you so much for being here. And as always, my contact information is in the show notes. You can always send me an email or reach out and tell me what your favorite book is, and I'll consider having it on the show. Okay, here we go. Let's dive into the book. Today we are talking about Unglued, Making Wise Choices in the Midst of Raw Emotions by Lysa Terkeurst. Lysa Terkeurst is incredibly famous. I'm sure you've heard of her. She has been around for a long time, and this is actually one of her older books. It was published in 2012, so it's about 12 years old. But when I read it, it really helped me deal with raw emotions, like she says. So it's going to talk a lot about what you face on the daily basis and how to deal with those emotions that come bubbling up and kind of make you feel out of control. But before we get started, I just wanted to give a quick disclaimer that I am in nature right now. Normally I'm holed up in a room of some sort that's usually somewhat contained, but right now I am in my front yard. So if you hear birds, those are real. And if I get stung by a bee and start screaming, that's probably real too, because they're everywhere. Okay, so Lysa Terkeurst has been around for a long time, and like I said, she is incredibly famous because she's the president of Proverbs 31 Ministries. She has authored several books. It says on the back cover here that she authored 15 books, but she has authored way more than that by now. She went through a lot in her personal life. She had a cancer battle, and then also she went through a divorce, and I check online every once in a while to see how she's doing and what she's up to, and I saw recently that she did get remarried. So the pictures are beautiful. They got married, I don't know where, but it was snowing, so that was kind of cool. And she has a beautiful family, lots of kids, a few grandkids, and it seems like she's doing really well. So I'm really happy to see that. I know that she's been through an enormous amount of pain and suffering in the last decade, and she has continued to write books and continued to encourage people. I especially like that she started a podcast with her therapist, and I forget what it's called. It's something about like therapy and theology or something, and she talks about Christian counseling or Christian therapy and how it has revolutionized her life, how it has helped her through some of the darkest days in her marriage and her divorce. And she really kind of sheds light on marital struggles, abuse, infidelity, all those things. And I think what she's doing is really powerful. It's really needed, and it's hard work. She's especially vulnerable about all of her struggles, and to have her life kind of bared open in front of everybody is incredibly taxing emotionally, but she has done it with such grace, and I really look up to her for that. And I'm thankful that women who are going through those types of things can turn to her and read her books and be encouraged. We're going to talk about 3 ways to stay in control when it comes to our emotions. Everybody knows what it feels like to be out of control emotionally, and the goal is to not do that, but we all know that it happens. She says on page 72, I'm trying to understand better this whole concept of self-control. The Bible includes many verses on the subject, among them Proverbs 25:28, Galatians 5:23, and 1 Peter 5:8. But it's hard to display self-control when someone else does things out of my control that yank my emotions into a bad place. So here's one little tidbit I'm learning. When someone else's actions or statements threaten to pull me into a bad place, I have a choice. I may not feel like it. In fact, it may feel like I'm a slave to my feelings, but I'm not. Remember, feelings are indicators, not dictators. They can indicate there's a situation I need to deal with, but they shouldn't dictate how I react. I have a choice. I totally relate with that when we get kind of in the heat of the moment. Do we really feel like we have a choice? I have often felt like, no, this person is doing something terrible. They have a choice to be nice to me, and they're not. So therefore, I'm totally justified in my reaction. But it is important to remember that we do have a choice of how we react and how we respond. And there is a difference between reacting versus responding. So the first way we can stay in control is to, number 1, know our tendencies. She talks about on page 68 the difference between a reaction and a reply. I like to think about getting an email, and she talks about this, where it's harsh and you feel like you want to respond right away. I was just watching a show the other night, and someone had, come to the front door and addressed this person's daughter behind her back and kind of threatened her to, be quiet about an issue. And so this mom kind of got really defensive, and she's like, I'm going over there right now to talk to her. And her partner was like, no, you're not. You need to cool down, or, you don't need to stand up and defend everything. Let's just not storm the gates. And I guess I related to both reactions, being so defensive and so angry that you want to address the issue immediately. And I do often do that. But then the wisdom in stepping back and saying, no, actually, I don't need to address this right this second. And I'm really worked up. My heart is beating fast. The blood is rushing to my head. I have a pounding headache all of a sudden, and my hands are getting clammy. You know when your body is telling you that you're about to fight someone, or, verbally or whatever. And it's often wise to step back and not do the first thing that is your impulse to go do. So like if you're getting a harsh email, instead of replying to it immediately, you may need to simply give it some time. I'm like, oh yeah, 5 or 10 minutes, that's enough time. No, I'm talking like a couple hours or even the next day. We really need to gather perspective, and that only comes with time and reflection and silence, prayer, because God will lead us to give a gentle response if we take the time to calm down from our heightened emotions. My favorite part of this book, and it comes in the first couple chapters, is called 4 Categories of Unglued Reactions. You know me, I love my lists, I love my categories, I love my structure. And this is a beautiful way to figure out what we do and why we do it. So she has 4 categories of unglued reactions. Number 1, exploders who shame themselves. Number 2, exploders who blame others. Number 3, stuffers who build barriers. Number 4, stuffers who collect retaliation rocks. When I read this like 10 years ago for the first time, I was blown away by just this simple categorizing of how we react. Am I an exploder or a stuffer? I can tell you 100% I'm an exploder and Kevin is a stuffer. Oh, it's just so obvious. I really didn't need to read this book to know that, but this book gave words to something that is incredibly telling about who we are and how our marriage works. So as we know our tendencies, she gives us a story on page 63 about being a middle school parent and something happens and another mom hurts her. So here she is. She's a middle school parent and she gets in this situation. There's a little bit of drama. Lysa recognizes that she is about to be an exploder who would later feel shame. She says, "I'll sometimes say to myself, sip the shame so you won't have to guzzle the regret." I find that really interesting, that we can kind of swallow our pride in the moment so that we don't have to ask for forgiveness later. This happens with my kiddos because when they push your buttons or when they're not obeying or when they are whining and dragging their feet and, just not on top of things like you want them to be, it's easy to kind of snap at them and tell them to get it together. Get it together, toddler. Can we pause enough to give ourselves up to God in that moment? It's not even, do I have the self-control? Because we really don't. Just because it's a fruit of the Spirit doesn't mean I have it. It means I have to ask for it. And I have to be willing to look up. In those moments, I'm not willing to stop and look up and ask for help. I'm not willing to listen to the Holy Spirit because the Holy Spirit's very obvious. He's like, hello, don't snap. Don't say that. She's a toddler. Let it go. Sit down with her and gently help her put her shoes on. Don't make this a big deal. But so often we are in a rush and we want what we want. And when our kids get in the way, it's the kids who suffer, and that's not right. So she has this chart in the back that kind of clarifies that you can be an internal processor, an internal suppressor, an external processor, or an external expressor. So basically, you're either an exploder or a stuffer. And I mean, there's different ways to do this, and you could be all these things. Stuffers value peace, and exploders value honesty. And I see that so much in our marriage. My husband values peace, and I value honesty. And neither of those things are bad, but they are at conflict with each other when I am trying to be vulnerable and honest and just say whatever I want to say and whatever I think and feel. And he's trying to keep the peace. So he's not saying whatever he thinks or feels because he doesn't want to hurt my feelings. So there needs to be this middle ground where I'm not exploding and he's not stuffing. And we're having honest communication that is clear and helpful and moves us in the right direction. I wonder if my husband knows I'm saying all these things about him. Number 2, we need to maintain expectations. She talks about on page 95 how we have these high expectations. You wish your mom were more like your friend's mom, who is actively engaged and helpful with the children. You wish your friend would make more time to call you, so you develop expectations for her to take your call and get together for lunch once a week. Or you wish your partner would be more romantic, so you develop expectations for them to show up with a bouquet of flowers or stay off the phone when you're together. She says, unrealistic expectations are things the other person isn't able or willing to do for me. I have to let go of these. Certainly, God can either change that person or change me by rearranging my desires. My mentor is constantly telling me that a lot of our hurt feelings come from unmet expectations. This can happen in a situation. Let's say you're going on an outing with the family, and so you want the weather to be great. You want the crowds not to be overwhelming. You want the jellyfish not to sting you. I don't know. You just expect a perfect vacation. And you also want your children to behave and for them to go to sleep at normal times and all these things. But once you get out on that vacation or take that trip or spend the day with people and things start to go wrong, we have to immediately restructure our expectations and manage the realistic approach to the day rather than the dreamy, perfect approach to the day. Near the end of the book, she talks about all these expectations she has when she first got married about what it meant to be a good wife. And she had all these notes in her head of what a good wife does, and the list was just so long. and she started to shut down. She felt inadequate. She assumed that her husband had those expectations for her as well. And she says, in a moment of complete exhaustion, I yelled, "Your expectations are ridiculous." To which he replied, "What expectations?" The list of hundreds of things I need to do to be a good wife. His blank stare dumbfounded me. He had no such list. And then later she says that she went to him and she says, "I can't do everything, but I can do 3 things. If you tell me your top 3 things, I will do those well." I don't know if every marriage needs to have that conversation, but it is beneficial to have a conversation when you're in a relationship or when you're in a friendship of, hey, I have these high expectations for myself that I need to do a certain thing. And I was just wondering if you agreed with that or if you felt things were, if you felt differently. I know one time I had an argument with a friend. It wasn't really an argument because I love her so, so much and I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but I was waiting for her to confirm her plans for the day and she hadn't texted me and I was kind of waiting around to see if we were going to, hang out. And then she texted me like way, like after dinner, and I was getting ready to put the kids down and be done for the day. And I was like, I kind of was waiting for you today and I thought we were going to hang out. And she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that, you were waiting and expecting me to get back with you about a certain time because I was waiting on." Basically, there was a total breakdown of communication and I was hurt, but I didn't communicate to her that I was waiting for her to get back with me at about a specific time to spend time together. Lastly, we do have to leave conflict ultimately to God. And this is a hard one because we just want to take things into our own hands. We want to deal with it and we want people to have a piece of our mind. I mean, right? She says on page 39, "We are God's workmanship. God is chiseling us, making us new, releasing us from our hard places, those places that make us feel defeated, so that we can do good works. Works God has prepared for us, which means He knows best how to prepare in us the character we need to fulfill our calling." I like how she talks about conflict and how it can be used to grow us or grow the other person or bring the relationship to an end. This certainly happens. Some conflict is not resolved. And when we approach it with prayer and surrender and honestly giving it up to God to let Him handle it the way that He sees best, we are not staying in control. We are staying in control by giving our control to God. The only way that makes sense to me is that I'm only in control of my part. I am not in control of the other person. She says on page 78, "Because I can't control the other person, I must focus on the good God is working out in me through this situation and leave the outcome with Him. If I make the effort to handle this conflict well, I can be freed from the pressure to make everything turn out rosy. Sometimes relationships grow stronger through conflict, other times relationships end." She also mentions that we have to acknowledge that our real enemy is not the other person. This has happened for me recently, and I've been reminded by wise people in my life that, the conflict I'm having with someone else, it's not that I'm right and they're wrong or vice versa. And they aren't who I'm fighting. And I have to let a lot of things go because I can only control what I can control. And I'm also probably filling in gaps that aren't true. Like I'm believing that this person is thinking things about me when they're probably not. And unless they've said it out loud, I don't need to believe the worst. But that has been a really hard lesson to learn. And I don't enjoy it. I'm in a new job and I'm faced with things that I've never done before. And I'm getting correction. I'm getting coaching. And that coaching can be incredibly painful because I'm making mistakes. But as I'm learning and growing, I get to surrender to God. He's filling in the gaps for me. I'm nowhere near the type of person I want to be in my job, but I'm open and I'm teachable. And yeah, I cry when I get hurt. I cry when the correction humiliates me, but at the same time, they are doing it in a loving way. And I really am learning and growing. And I need to be thankful for that because I'm going to be a better person. because of all of this learning. And one day I won't be a rookie. But right now, I am. Okay, so we talked about 3 ways to stay in control. Know our tendencies, maintain expectations, and leave conflict ultimately to God. Whether you're an exploder or a stuffer, an internal processor or an external processor, there is so much to learn, and there's always room to grow. And I hope that you have grace for yourself in the journey. I know that's hard, and that's one thing that I struggle with a lot, is having grace for myself. But what I've learned is that, just like we did in our last book, Try Softer, God doesn't want us to live the try hard life. He wants us to surrender and try softer and be gentle with ourselves. Thank you for listening to another episode of Book Therapy. Today we talked about Unglued, Making Wise Choices in the Midst of Raw Emotions by Lysa Terkeurst. Once again, Lysa Terkeurst is incredible. There are links in the show notes to her website, and I encourage you to check out her book. She has several devotionals that have been really encouraging to me, and also specific books that deal with issues like The Best Yes, where she talks about making choices and how to spend your time and saying no to the right things and saying yes to the right things, and so many other books. So I encourage you to check her out. I'm sure you have already. All right, see you next time.